and welcome to Film Fam, inspired by true events. I'm Zoe,
I'm Brian.
I'm Heather.
and today we're going to be doing the companion Minisode for this week's episode on the Goonies. With me here today is our very, very special guest, Heather Gray,
Hello.
and dog.
Hi, Heather. Yeah, I meant to notify, warn, prepare our listeners. Heather cannot be here today as a host, so Zoe and I are going to have to host. Instead, we bring you special guest Heather Gray.
Hi, thanks for having me on the podcast.
Thanks for coming. Are you familiar with the format?
Why don't you spell it out for me?
We're just going to be
Okay.
asking you a few questions about your relationship to the movie Goonies and your special area of expertise,
All right.
um, which might be an interesting tie-in. So during the movie The Goonies, there is a song by Cyndi Lauper, and I think it plays on the TV, and they watch part of it in the movie, which is funny because they are also in the music video that they are watching. But Cyndi Lauper wrote this song, and it has this really fun two-part, like long video, and it has the Bangles in it, and it has Steven Spielberg in it, but it also has a lot of famous pro wrestlers. It has Andre the Giant. It has Captain Lou Albano. It has the fabulous Moolah, among others, Wendy Richter. Just a whole lot of
Rowdy
famous,
Piper,
yeah,
Oh yeah.
pro
Nikolai
wrestlers.
Volkov. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, the Iron Sheik, yes,
Yep.
and more. And they, hang out with Cindy and also the kids from the Goonies. So by proxy, it's like you hung out with the Goonies because you, in fact, were a pro wrestler. And
What?
you have a connection to some of these people, don't you?
I do actually. Well, I wrestled people who wrestled Wendy Richter. My trainer, Liz Chainsaw Chase, she wrestled Wendy Richter. At the time in the 80s, Wendy was like the most popular women's wrestler. And I would say Moolah was the most popular women's wrestler before Wendy, and China was the most popular women's wrestler after. And I wrestled China. My trainer wrestled Wendy, and Moolah trained my trainer. So
So
I
you're
Whoa.
have,
basically the granddaughter.
yeah, I'm Moolah's granddaughter. No. And so that's my connection to the pro wrestling aspect of the Goonies.
Wow.
I have a lot of questions. What got you into pro wrestling? Was it like since you were a kid, you were like, I want to grow up and be a pro wrestler? Or did you watch a lot of pro wrestling? Or
Um, no, I had no plans to be a pro wrestler at all, not one. In the 80s, wrestling was much more in the pop culture, just like you can see in Goonies. There's this whole tie-in. And,
hmm
Hulk Hogan was in Rocky, one of the Rocky movies. And so even if you weren't into pro wrestling, it was still something that just, there's lots of tie-ins to other media that you might know. And it was just spread out, even if you weren't a fan. I did become a fan later on. A boyfriend liked it, and I got into it then. And so I was a fan before I started pro wrestling. I was a pretty big fan. I watched WWF, WCW every week. I had my favorite wrestlers.
who are your favorite wrestlers?
Well, Shawn Michaels, I really liked. Although he was not that great when I first started watching wrestling, but he had his moment in the sun.
Oh, well, there's different levels of greatness. I mean, when Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty were tag teaming as the Rockers,
Yes.
uh, I mean, that's greatness.
The
I
Rockers.
took my t-shirts and I cut the sleeves into the strips so they were like frilly and stuff, and they were great.
I also loved Owen Hart,
Mm.
rest in peace, and The Rock once he came on as Rocky Maivia and The Rock. I those and Cactus Jack, who also was Mankind. So I had a lot of different people that I liked.
I was thinking about what you were saying about pro wrestlers being in pop culture. I think they definitely were a lot more in the 80s. I'm thinking the only ones I can think of right now who are also like just big like public figures and in movies and stuff, there's still The Rock. John
Right.
Cena is
Right.
really big. He's
That's
in,
true.
in Blockers, in Psych. And
Right.
also like Ronda Rousey is, she was in the Fast and the Furious movies, but there's not as many. I wouldn't say it's like as maybe widespread in pop culture now, maybe because people know more now about the acting side of it. I don't
Right.
know.
Kayfabe is what that is called. So when I was wrestling, kayfabe was still in effect, although I think officially it wasn't because Vince McMahon, the president of the WWF, had to testify that it was fake in a trial that had something to do with whether they had to have insurance or pay people things based on if it was a real sport. And so he had to
Mm,
testify that it wasn't. But even after that, a lot of people still thought it was real because they didn't really pay attention to this trial
sure.
and they didn't publicize the trial. But so when I started wrestling, kayfabe was like the world, everyone that watches the audience is your mark, and you are pulling one over on them, and you have to be secret about the fact that you aren't these characters because when you're on stage, right, as an actress, you know this, you have to stay in character. Pro wrestlers
Right.
are staying in character, but because they're also supposed to be in character all the time. It's not supposed to be on stage, it's supposed to be in character all the time. So you're never allowed around normal people, around marks or whatever, to come out of character. So if you're traveling, you're not allowed to, like, enemies aren't supposed to hang out with each other. You're supposed to
Right.
stay in character all the time.
The closest thing I can think of is like certain like musician, like Lady Gaga is Lady Gaga, which is a performance, but we also know that she's Stephanie Germanotta under that and wouldn't be like, why aren't you acting like Lady Gaga at all times? I thought that was just who you were as a person, but like people really did feel that way about pro wrestlers.
Yeah, in a big way. I mean, people really, I don't know why. I didn't think it was real, but a lot of people really thought it was real to the point where like they would try to kill wrestlers. Pro wrestlers would get stabbed by fans
Wow.
if they were heels. And it was almost like a badge of honor if you didn't get too stabbed. That's like, wow, I convinced people so thoroughly that I'm real that they want to kill me. So kayfabe, there was a handshake that you did if you were in mixed company and you did a certain handshake, and if they shook your hand the same way, then you would know that they're in on it, and then you could talk more openly.
So when did you get to be in on it once you started being a pro wrestler?
Yes, yeah.
And at some point, they take you into a room, and they're like, "Okay, now you have to say the Goonies pledge," and then we
And
teach
met
you the
meet
handshake,
Cyndi Lauper.
and now we all use, I don't know, the familiar form of you instead of the formal form, and then you're inside.
Well, when you were on the inside, what was your gimmick? Were you a baby face, a heel? You know, everyone has to have a thing. What was your
Yes.
thing?
So babyface are the good guys and heels are the bad guys. And you can have a turn, which is when you turn from one to the other in some big dramatic moment. I was a
Mm.
babyface because I was young looking. I mean, I was young. I was
How old
23,
were
but
23?
23, but I looked young too. I always look kind of younger than my age, and I had long blonde hair, and I wasn't. I'm not sure I could be a very good heel at that point. Um, so I was a baby face, and I was Heather McMasters, and I was supposed to be Scottish, and I wore a plaid leotard.
Did you speak in a Scottish accent?
Do you think I did?
No.
I'm not, I can't do accents.
you you especially can't do Scottish. Scottish is
Oh no,
hard.
I can't do any accents. No, no. Not at all. My theme song was the Highlander theme song, for the Queen song from the movie.
Nice.
Very cool. How
Yeah.
many how many matches did you were you in total?
Well, not very many. So first I was in like a local match, then I was in a boxing match.
Oh,
Yeah. And then I was in another match, and then I was in my last match. So I was in 4 matches, but you have to train a lot. Like I spent a
Hmm.
whole summer, I think. I don't remember how long it was, but I spent a long time just training how to do these things because I was training how to do regular, like American US style pro wrestling. And also I trained with a Puerto Rican luchador and their style, like a masked, that it's like a Mexican style where it's very high flying, a lot of acrobatic, cool moves, and they wear masks. And I didn't have a mask, but I was training to do that because I was one of the people that could in the group.
Because before this, you had a background in athletics. You did martial arts.
Right, yes. So I'd done martial arts for a while. My dad had a dojo, a karate dojo, and also we did judo. And I was training for my black belt when I saw an ad in the newspaper, just an ad in the newspaper, a classified ad. I think I was looking for a job or something. I'm like, maybe I can get a better job than I have, and used to look in the classifieds. And it was like wanted professional wrestling, especially women. And so I was like, well, I've done acting. I used to do musical theater, and I'm pretty athletic. I do martial arts. I'm like, I should check this out. And it's really not that hard if you want to do it. They'll take you.
How was
I mean,
how
wait,
dangerous
it
was the
is hard.
training?
It's hard to do. It's just
It's hard to
if you're
do.
willing to do it, they'll take you, I think.
What was the training like? Was it really difficult? Like, was
Yes,
it
there was a ring and
dangerous?
it was yes. It is dangerous. Pro wrestling's dangerous. My trainer, Liz Chase, she had a ring set up outside on her property. She would train us, and we would have other people who were pro wrestlers come by and train us in different things. Like one time, we just had a guy come and train us in how to kind of like stall and catch your breath. So
Hmm.
you just kind of lock up and you do some back and forth kind of moving around and different ways to like so you can catch your breath or talk to each other or slow everything down. Not just moves, but like how to slow it down in the ring so you can spread out the amount of fighting you're doing
Right, so the
and have it take a lot
pacing,
longer. Yeah. And
right.
that guy was a smoker, so it was real funny because he really couldn't do that much. He had to slow it down because he had bad lungs from smoking.
So he like puts you in an arm bar with one arm, and with the other arm he's smoking.
He's, he's looking. And then we had the luchador come and taught us how to do different flips and like kind of flying through the ropes or how to like use the ropes to do some cool acrobatics.
Did
And
you have a
yeah.
favorite move or a signature move or anything?
I hadn't really gotten to the point where I had a whole signature move, but since I was doing more of the luchador track, that would be something I would come up. So I don't have a good answer for that. I had a move I
That's
wasn't
okay.
good at.
Oh, what was the move you weren't good at?
The one that I wasn't good at was one where I grabbed them either like upside down and drop them on what it would look like their head, but it's actually like their shoulders because they pull their heads in, and
Mm.
I land and I'm holding them to my body and I drop onto my butt, or I could drop them onto their butt, just depending on I'm holding them. But I have to, from a standing position, you kind of jump up holding them and then you land right on your butt.
Mm.
And I just couldn't make myself land on my butt. I thought like I was going to hurt my spine or something.
Mm.
And so I just kept grabbing like stopping myself from doing it over and over. It was like some weird mental block I had.
Well, I feel like that would hurt your spine. Like, are you supposed? Is your back supposed to be vertical, or are you like bent over to absorb it, or because if your back is vertical, you're just compressing your spine when you land.
Yeah. I
Do you
mean,
think they cared if you were?
they don't care very much. No, it's dangerous. It is dangerous. And they're not going to, it's like if you care too much, you're not going to be able to do the things that you're doing. I had someone do a move on me, Psycho Sybil, when we were training for the last match I did, and she dropped me on my head incorrectly, and I my neck made a sound, and then I was just laying there on the mat, and I was like, I'm gonna try to see if I can move my toes. Like I hope I didn't just get paralyzed by this lady who was acting too dangerous. She was really trying to stay in character all the time, and I didn't break my neck, but people do hurt themselves badly all the time because you're doing kind of crazy things with your body. It's dangerous. And I ended up that's why I stopped is I got injured.
What was the craziest match you were ever in?
Well, it was just the last match. The one that I trained for with Psycho Sybil, a girl whose character was Riptide, and her name is Angel Orsini, if you look her up. And we were the baby faces, and we were going up against Psycho Sybil and China, who at the time she was going by her name Joni Lee, but she very quickly after this match she went on to become China in the
Quite
WWF.
famous.
Very famous. She's like, I think she just has such a great story of how well she did in professional
Yeah,
wrestling.
and I'm feeling like that was a lopsided match. I mean, with
Oh
China
yeah.
there,
Oh
I
yeah.
mean that's like that time that Kobe Bryant and Smush Parker combined for 83 points in a game.
Yeah. So I was fighting Psycho Sybil, and she liked to juice. She would cut herself with a razor blade, so it looked like you made her bleed. And so like you could hit her with something, and then like or push her head against something, and then she would see, when you're not looking, she would cut herself with a
Because
blade.
head wounds bleed a lot, but aren't
Yeah.
necessarily actually
Yeah,
that
but
dangerous.
I've seen older wrestlers with their foreheads all scarred up.
Ooh,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah,
scary.
it's not good. It's not good. And so she also had like this is in the mid 90s. She had a tongue piercing, which was like kind of like, oh, a tongue piercing, and lots of tattoos. So she was always going to be a heel. And I fought her, and then Angel was mostly fighting Joni Lee, China. But then I came back into the ring and I hit China with a chair because that's the only
Very
way.
Yeah, you
nice.
did.
Even though I was supposed to be a baby face, so that's quite, is that really a good baby face move? But they had throughout that match been cheating, been pulling us off, been making the referee not pay attention to when we were doing things like maybe pinning them. And so
Sometimes
finally,
enough is enough.
little baby face Heather McMasters got fed up and just had to hit China with a chair.
I feel like professional wrestling is long overdue for video replay and a team of people in New York to watch and catch these things
I
that
mean, the refs are
violations that the refs miss.
the refs are constantly looking in the wrong direction. I think they just need better training, to be honest. I mean, come on, come on.
Yeah.
Was
They
it?
need to be held accountable for the accuracy of their calls.
I agree. Was it like a wooden chair or like a metal folding chair? I'm thinking
It
about
was a
that part in
metal.
Ranma where they're doing rhythmic
Yeah.
gymnastics and they like grab like a guy on a chair and hit each other with it.
Yeah, it was a folding chair and folded it up and hit her with it. And then we were wrestling outside of the ring, as you do when things get crazy. And all the heels came down, and then all the baby faces came down, and we had a big rumble that was inside and outside the ring. And that is when I tore all the ligaments off my ankle. And it's like the worst sprain, I guess, you can have
Ooh.
because your ligaments aren't attached anymore. And I had to be carried away. And then by the
Wait a minute.
time, what?
Wait. Is it because you had a heel turn?
Okay.
And then by the time I healed, I was just not interested in doing pro wrestling anymore.
But you still had like involvement with pro wrestling after that, right?
I did. I got hired by CBS. They had a website called Sportsline, and I got hired to be the producer of their pro wrestling webpage. And we had writers who would watch all the shows and the pay-per-view, and it would be WWF, WCW, ECW, any pay-per-view, any local shows. And then they would send it to me with photos, and then I would put it all. So I was like a web content producer for CBS for pro wrestling, but I also did interviews with pro wrestlers. And I had to watch all the pro wrestling that was on television just so that I knew that the writers were writing the correct thing. And so I was watching like 20, I don't even know, 16 to 20 hours of wrestling every week.
Oh,
Wow.
man.
So
I
you're
don't
really
know.
up to date on all the drama.
Yeah,
And
it
that whole
was.
time you were at Sportsline, who would you say was the cutest guy in the office?
Oh boy.
Well, there was
Yeah,
this one guy.
objectively.
He worked over
No, don't be objective. Say what I want to hear.
he worked over at the basketball and NASCAR sports area, a computer programmer by the name of
Oh, they're hot.
Brian. Yeah, he was hot.
Oh, no, weird. You can't say that.
But I actually have some stories where I met pro wrestlers before I was pro wrestling when I was just a fan.
Yeah.
Yeah, one time we were at a match down in South Florida. That's where I lived. It was very early Owen Hart, who's part of the Hart Foundation and the Hart family of Canadian wrestlers like Bret Hart and Jin the Anvil Neidhart, who I think is married into the family. Anywho, it was an early Owen match, and I didn't like him at this point. And I started up a chant, Owen sucks.
Oh, how
Ooh,
creative.
that's how long did it take you to come up with that?
Um, oh, like 10 minutes. 10 minutes. So I started up this chant, and then the Jim the Anvil, he liked it and he started chanting it along with me. And then he came out into
Nice.
like, I mean, it was with me. And then he came out into the audience and like sat in front of us and did some chanting. And one time I stole the Intercontinental belt from Goldust, who's the son of Dusty Rhodes. He was having a fight. Gosh, I can't remember who he's fighting. It might have been Owen Hart. I'm not sure. Anyway, he took his belt off and he hit Owen with it, and then it got thrown to the ground. And I was in like the front row or the second row standing, and it was just on the ground behind this like low fence. So I just stuck my foot under the fence and put my foot on the belt, and then I pulled it underneath, and then I grabbed it and I held it up in the air.
Did they
And I
make
was
you
like,
give it
"Whoa."
back?
No, then someone else took it from me and it got passed all around where everybody held it up in the air. And then whoever had it last, I think they got thrown out.
So that
And
kind of
it's
worked
your
out the
fault.
best for you that it could have.
Yeah. And one time I met Ole Anderson. Yeah, there's just, and Sting, he's a WCW wrestler. There's different, you go to events and then you might meet people at a bar afterwards or just, you
Don't
know,
you have another piece of memorabilia from a pro wrestler?
well, yeah, but that one I bought online to for something that he was doing. Mankind has this character Sako. So Mankind and The Rock used to be in a relationship. It was heterosexual, I think, but
What does
Mankind
that
like
mean? Wait, please explain what that means.
well, Mankind like loved The Rock and would do anything for The Rock, and The Rock was like kind of trying to teach him, I don't know, how to become like a normal human. And Mankind had a sock that he would talk through named Sako. And so one time I saw that Mankind was selling Sakos that he had signed online, and I bought one. So I have a Sako. Yeah.
Well, you're not only a big fan, but you're also part of the legacy now. I mean, you actually wrestled China and you were,
Yeah, I hit her with a chair.
granddaughtered into the legacy of the fabulous Moolah, who also has an interesting legacy herself, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I never met Mula, but later on, but she trained my trainer and she trained a lot of women. That was when she was like the champion, like the women's champion for a very long time, like I don't know, 26 years or something. And at the same time, I think she was also training. She had her own stable of other of like women wrestlers that she trained or that were trained under her tutelage, under her name. And then I was watching this TV show, or maybe I just looked it up online, but there's a TV show if you like wrestling, which then if you do, you know about it. It's The Dark Side of the Ring. But Moolah is credibly accused of like pimping out or like trafficking some of the girls that were she was supposed to be training to male wrestlers, and that was part of the deal
Mm.
also, that if like, oh well, if you want time to wrestle then you have to have sex with some people that I'm telling you to have sex with, which is terrible and maybe one of the reasons she should not be in the Wrestling Hall of Fame if that's how she was behaving. So the whole thing, Zoe, one of the reasons I decided not to go back to wrestling is because it was pretty skeezy, and it's a lot of people who are I think there's probably some really great people. I'm not saying at all that pro wrestling people are skeezy or something, but there were some elements that were not good when drugs were involved, and partly because a lot of people were in physical pain.
A
Although I
lot
think
of
drugs are
dangerous conditions in
right.
general.
I think people, any athletes are in a lot of physical pain, and some
Sure.
of them turn to drugs to deal with that pain.
Yeah.
Some of the people I wrestled with on that big match where I met China, one of those people, she's actually really famous. Her name is Luna Vachon, and she is also a very famous pro wrestler. traveled all around the world, and she's really well known in WWF, which is now called what? WWE?
WWE.
Right, and WCW, and she was actually friends. She came from a wrestling family, Luna, and she was actually friends with Andre the Giant,
Wow.
and she trained under Fabulous Moolah. She actually was a backup girl to like someone who fought, like came to the ring to Shawn Michaels, who is my favorite.
Wow.
So she was one of the people. I have a picture of myself with her and China. She died of an overdose when she was only 48 years old, which is how old I'll be later this year. And so China, she died of an overdose when she was 46 years old.
Wow.
So
Wow.
Liz Chase, my trainer, she died not from an when she it's weird to think that she died when she was 45, and so she was
That's younger than you are now.
younger than
Wow.
I am now because she seemed older to me because I was only 23, but she died during a plastic surgery procedure. Um
Wow, that's scary.
yeah, and different people really had different kinds of hard times with drugs and just the hard life of that. And I was like, it just doesn't seem like this scene I want to be involved in. And maybe there was a different scene that I could have been involved in, but yeah, it was not good. And plus, it's you get hurt.
You probably weren't unique in getting an injury that bad, but you just decided like maybe it's not 100% worth it.
Yeah, and
Whereas
I
some
was
people
on.
just get injured like that a lot
Oh
and
yeah.
go
I
through.
I don't know where it would have gone with me, like if I would have ever been, like in a big time or anything like that. I was with people who were, and the next step for me was to go to Libya because I
Oh,
guess they like their pro wrestling, and then to go to Japan, who loves pro wrestling. And then I guess once I'd had enough training and stuff, we'd see where it went. But one of the people I trained with who started the same time I did, she ended up doing a lot of more like sexual things, not
mm,
not mud wrestling, but like in media that was like wrestling media, but it was more about the sexuality of the female wrestlers
right.
and like needing to get breast implants. That was a terrible kind of time in the 90s and early 2000s. I think pro wrestling's much better for women now. As far as what I see, it seems like there's much more equality, and the athleticism of the women is, more important than just their bodies. But I never feel like, oh, I wish I had just tried to keep pro wrestling because I think it would have not been good for me, for my body or like my mind, really. Although,
Right.
again, I'm not saying it's for everybody who's in the industry is having some kind of problem, but I saw a lot of it.
Right. Well, you were able to use your pro wrestling skills and knowledge to help me out at one point in high school because
Oh
I
yeah, that's
was
right.
I in junior year I directed a production of Shakespeare's As You Like It, which has a big wrestling match near the beginning, and I wasn't sure what to do for it, and then it was like, oh well, my mom would absolutely know how to choreograph a wrestling match because it's not just about like the moves, it's all that stuff you were talking about. Like, what do you think you you know about like what makes a good pro wrestling match that you were able to use to help me?
Well, sure. The babyface has to lose a lot in the beginning to get, the crowd kind of on their side, and the heel has to do his heel work of like, you know, doing all the dastardly things that can turn the crowd against him, and so that then it's exciting when the baby face comes back at the end. And there's times, it's like, oh, we got his shoulder down to the mat, 1 2, and then he pulls his shoulder up. Oh, and it depends if it's the heel or the baby face doing that. It's just creating a whole emotional roller coaster of who's going to win and what's going to happen to them, and the drama of the relationship worked
Mm-hmm.
out with cool moves. Everyone likes the cool moves, but the relationship and what's happening to it during the match, it's like a little mini movie or a little TV show, the whole thing. It has to have all the same beats.
Aren't there like in the whole, in WWF or WWE, there's like long stories, right? It's like, oh, you kidnapped my wife and now I have to, like it's like soap opera
Oh yeah,
long
that's
because they
a
have to come up with like, oh, the good guy's going to turn bad for a time, but then we got to get him back to good or whatever, right? And come up with all
yeah.
these crazy. That's the part that makes it so funny to me that people really genuinely thought that all of that, I guess, was real.
Oh
Well,
man, I was beside myself when the Macho Man turned against Hulk Hogan and the superpowers collided.
I mean, yeah, you get invested in the characters. Sometimes real stuff did happen. Like there's a thing
Yeah.
called the Montreal screw job where Bret Hart was supposed to win and they didn't tell him and they took it away from him. And sometimes people who were dating characters who were dating got married in real life and stuff.
Oh,
There was real stuff. And like I said, there are people who were
two in
stabbed
character. Oh, that too. Yeah.
by
Yeah.
fans because the fans really thought it was real. My luchador trainer, he was stabbed by a fan.
Wow.
Yeah, and he showed
That's
me
crazy.
scars. They take it pretty hardcore over there.
Yeah, I mean, I guess
Um,
if you think that like this is a real athlete that I like and he's getting screwed over and actually having bad things in his life happen to him because of this other person. If you think that's real, you'd get really incensed, I imagine.
but also there's like a character like the Undertaker whose point is that he's
Right?
kind of dead and he has magical powers that can make him come back to life. Like, I
I
mean,
believe
there's
in
just
that
so
too.
many funny things. Like, there's a guy named Jake the Snake. I don't know if we'll leave all this in, but who would just take a big snake out of a bag that he carried and then put it on you once you were
That's what
like,
she said.
he would always knock you out and then put a big snake on
Oh no,
you.
and he had a big rivalry with Andre the Giant, who was deathly afraid of snakes, and
Right.
they
Wow.
simulated the scene where he put the snake on him, and Andre the Giant had a heart attack, and Bobby Heenan is like climbing up on him doing CPR and stuff, and like they just they made all of this happen.
Yeah, there
It
would be people
sounds,
who really would play, they would really play out like, I mean, you watched Glow, Zoe, the
yeah.
TV
How
show.
how
Not,
accurate vibe-wise was Glow?
it's worse than that. It's more,
It's
maybe if
real
you're
life is
just,
worse than Glow.
yeah, maybe if you were just working with those women in LA, it was more like Glow. But my situation in South Florida was a little not as like girl power as that per se. But they would play out things like there's Russians, you're fighting Russians during the 80s,
Right.
and then like the Americans would come in, or you're fighting the Iron Sheik. Oh, he's rich. He has that oil money, you know, and we gotta then we'll have Hacksaw Jim Duggan come and beat him up with a 2x4 like an American, like stuff like that.
Very, or like just like racialized or,
I
you
think
know.
a lot of times my favorites were the stereotypes that weren't good or bad, but just weird, like Hacksaw Jim Duggan or the Bushwhackers, or
That was a stereotype of weird or Australians.
yeah, yeah, but it wasn't like it
Right.
didn't get into like a political good guy bad guy like Iron Sheik or Nikolai Volkov and Boris Zukov and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It was just like, well, here's some weird characters and they're gonna fight.
I like the ones that are like old ladies.
Yeah.
Do you have any other anecdotes you want to share from behind the scenes things that people might not know?
I don't
Covered a
know.
lot of ground.
I might have said everything.
Uh, we may not ever get another chance to interview about your journalism. Uh, so, very briefly, could you tell us about the time that you interviewed King Diamond?
Oh, yes.
Sure. Yeah. Wow. I almost think I was a wild child. When King Diamond is like a death metal guy from Denmark, he did these concept albums that I liked about like haunted houses or possessed children or things like that. And he sung in this really crazy falsetto voice and he wore makeup like Kiss. And I just really liked him because I don't know, I was going through that phase. And so I really wanted to talk to him. So I
How
pretended
how old are you in this
I
story?
was in high school. So I was in high school. I was like 17 or 16 or something. I called the on a tape of his I had, or a CD, talked about like who produced the album. And so I contacted them and I said that I had a music magazine, like a school magazine that was about music, and I wanted to interview him for my magazine. I didn't have a magazine at all. I wasn't a journalist. I would have loved to be, but I just lied and said that I did, and they got me an interview with him. And so I
Wow.
interviewed King Diamond, and I just asked him
For your
whatever.
personal gain.
Yeah, and I recorded it on a tape, and I wish I still had that tape, but I just asked him what I wanted to know, and I kind of tried to be a journalist too. I was like, maybe I'll write this up and turn it into something. Maybe this is the first interview of my new high school music magazine, my music zine. So I just got
It's
to,
very that movie with Beanie
yeah.
Feldstein.
So I just asked him, whatever I wanted to know, and I talked to him for a long time. And yeah, but I guess I just was a liar who was, or a go-getter, really depending on how you think about it.
Yeah, I mean, then you became a journalist. So
I did. I was a
who's
journalist
really
for
lying
a
in their
while.
hearts?
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for asking me that.
Well, thank you so much for making the time to come onto this humble podcast.
Thank you.
Like Film Fam, inspired by true events, subscribe to hear more stories that inspired our favorite films.
For photos and links from the show and other shenanigans, follow us on Instagram at FilmFamPodcast, on Twitter at FilmFam_podcast, on Facebook at FilmFam Inspired by True Events.
If you have any questions, comments, corrections, or films whose inspiration you would like us to explore, you can email us at filmfanpodcast@gmail.com.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, me. And thank you all for listening. See you next time.
Bye.
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 I said, thank you, me.
Thank you,
Awesome
me.
outro.